The Beatles' connection with the Byrds has not received as much attention as, say, the Beatles' rivalry with the Rolling Stones or the Beatles' rivalry with the Beach Boys. The Byrds undoubtedly absorbed much of the Beatles' influence, as did all day bands. Today, we are going to discuss about the Beatles versus the Byrds, how both bands drew inspiration from one another, and how the Beatles helped the Byrds gain popularity. But before we get into the video, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like this video. Let's start by learning a little about the Byrds' history and how they came to be. The Byrds were an American band from the 1960s that helped popularize folk music, especially Bob Dylan's songs, and whose personnel changes led to the emergence of numerous influential country rock bands and pop supergroups. The Byrds were never as well known as the Fab Four. Still, they were recognized as the American Beatles for their distinctive sound. They were fueled by Roger McGuinn's jangly 12-string Rickenbacker guitar and the vocals of McGuinn, Gene Clark, David Crosby, and Chris Hillman. They are well known for a variety of works, including the electric folk successes Turn, Turn, Turn and Mr. Tambourine Man, and sonic experiments with country rock or the then rudimentary Moog synthesizer. In 1965, the Byrds' first song, a cover of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man, reached number 1, ending the British invasion's year-long hold on American Top 40 radio and record sales. They established Los Angeles as the creative hub of a new mod, distinctly American type of rock, while introducing Dylan's songwriting to a new, commercially empowered, youthful pop audience. The Byrds infused the Appalachian folk music tradition with the rhythmic vigor of the Beatles and the Sunday hedonism of Southern California to create their signature sound, a brilliant blend of 12-string electric guitar and vocal harmonies with a madrigal flavor. Early Byrds albums included jangly, clear covers of Dylan, Pete Seeger, Porter Wagner, and Stephen Foster that captured the shifting atmosphere of young America and the illusions of a utopian Pacific coast. Until late 1967, when Crosby and Clark left, the Byrds performed as a four. Graham Parsons, a pioneer of country rock, was among the new members McGuinn and Hillman planned to bring in. But by late 1968, Hillman and Parsons had also left the group. McGuinn decided to reassemble the band. From 1968 until 1973, he presided over a new iteration of the Byrds that included guitarist Clarence White. Early in 1973, McGuinn disbanded the group's current configuration to make room for the reunion of the original five. The Byrds' final album was released in March 1973, and they split up later that year after a brief reunion. They were only 4 youngsters from Liverpool, but they became known as the Beatles: John, Paul, George, and Ringo. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr could never have predicted that they would establish one of the most influential bands in contemporary history, impacting the popular culture in not only music, but also fashion, film, and global representation. The Beatles, also known as the Fab Four or the Quarrymen, were a British musical group that captured the hopes and dreams of a generation that came of age in the 1960s. The core group, Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, have been performing together since 1958. Before inviting Starr to join them in 1962, they passed through some drummers, including Pete Best. After signing with EMI Records and recording their first hit, Love Me Do, in late 1962, manager Brian Epstein modeled them into a professional group, and producer George Martin supervised and refined their records, substantially expanding their domestic success. The band earned the moniker the Fab Four as their fame soared into the strong fan frenzy known as Beatlemania, with Epstein, Martin, and other band members occasionally being referred to as the Fifth Beatle informally. The Beatles had attained previously unheard of levels of critical acclaim and financial success by the beginning of 1964, making them global celebrities. They played a key role in Britain's cultural renaissance, launching the British invasion of the American music market, and made their cinematic debut with A Hard Day's Night shortly after, 1964. The band stopped playing live shows in 1966 due to a growing desire to improve their studio work and practicality of their concert tours. The two bands' relationship. Now let's talk about how the two bands learned from one another. We already know that the two bands had large fan bases, and as time passed, it became clear how the two managed to mesh. The Byrds impacted the Beatles as they developed as a band. It's easy to see the similarities and shared love between the Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man, Fifth Dimension, and Younger Than Yesterday, and the Beatles' Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver albums. The bands share more than just intricate vocal harmonies and 12-string Rickenbackers. The Byrds' frontmen, Jim McGuinn and David Crosby, met John Lennon and George Harrison in a fateful encounter that led to the use of the sitar on Norwegian Wood by the Beatles and the inspiration for the lyrics to She Said from Revolver. The four got together on August 24, 1965, at a house the Beatles had rented in Los Angeles, and they all took LSD. Crosby is credited for introducing Lennon to Ravi Shankar's music while the two were jamming on 12-string guitars, even though Harrison was already familiar with a master sitar player's output. The Beatles' August 1966 album, Revolver, ushered forth a new era. The four men dug down and decided to venture into uncharted territory since they were tired of touring, which they believed had negatively impacted their musicianship. The Beatles produced one of the greatest albums of all time with the help of legendary producer George Martin and talented recording engineer Geoff Emerick. Revolver was a brave move forward, beginning with the bluesy Taxman, one of the Beatles' few social illusions, compared to the Byrds' numerous, and concluding with the ego-death celebrating sonic explosion Tomorrow Never Knows. Eleanor Rigby was one of the few pop songs that dealt with death, similar to the Fifth Dimension's I Come and Stand at Every Door, while I'm Only Sleeping revealed John Lennon's burgeoning LSD addiction. The dreamy sound of I'm Only Sleeping was produced using guitars played backwards and vocals that sped up and down. The sitar and tambura are present in Harrison's Love You Too, which developed the skepticism of thinking for yourself, and Your Bird Can Sing, which featured arpeggiated guitars to accentuate its sarcastic lyrics, was followed by the previously described She Said, which created tensions broken up by the joyous Good Day Sunshine. The Beatles' favorite plant was the subject of McCartney's Motown influence Got to Get You Into My Life, followed by Harrison's song I Want to Tell You. Today, the band's greatest accomplishment would challenge what audiences in 1966 understood as logic and undoubtedly serve as inspiration for the Byrds' Mind Garden's Tomorrow is a Mystery. Tomorrow features technology that wasn't even created yet and is based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Timothy Leary's teachings. The song leaps to sonic heights not yet imagined, requiring the destruction of Abbey Road Studios and the literal breaking into the wiring of a Leslie speaker in order to get the sound Lennon desired. It builds a world through sound that is almost palpably real, like the best music should. Although not distinct from Fifth Dimension's themes, the lyrics made Mind Expansion well known. Revolver is one of the Beatles' most intriguing, multi-layered albums and one of the most impactful ones ever released. If I Need Someone was influenced by the music of the Byrds, who in turn based their sound and appearance on that of the Beatles after viewing the band's 1964 film, A Hard Day's Night, in addition to George Harrison's interest in Indian classical music. The Byrds and the Beatles were two bands of varying fame that nonetheless benefited from one another and possibly dared each other to go further. From the country-tinged folk rock hits of the early years to the Indian influence and psychedelic rock of the later ones. Even though the Beatles will have a bigger historical impact, the Byrds should have gotten more credit for their steady stream of superb records that shook the status quo, albeit not to the same degree as the Beatles. With their ambition to develop without sacrificing melody, both undoubtedly will have an impact on musicians today. With this, our video comes to an end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, give this video a big thumbs up, and share your reviews in the comment section below. I will see you guys in the next one.